have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars, but I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living, didn't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes. Mama said, build up the prophecies, something greater, go make a legacy, manifest destiny. Back in the days we wanted everything, and Mama said, when your biographies will rewrite your history, light up your wildest dreams and museum victories. Every day we wanted everything, Mama said, don't give up, it's a little complicated, all tied up, no more love, and I'd hate to see you waiting. Well, I had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars, but I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living, don't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always have high hopes. And Mama said, something for oddities, crazy crusaders, and every one of these weekend novelties. Don't ever change, we wanted everything, Stay up on that rise, stay up on that rise, never come down. Whoa, whoa. Stay up on that rise, stay up on that rise, never come down. Mama said, don't give up, it's a little complicated, all tied up, no more love, and I hate to see you waiting. They said all's been done, but they haven't seen the best of me. So I got one more run, and it's gonna be as right to say. Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting from the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. For a living, don't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes. Have to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars, but I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living, didn't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always have high hopes.
My name is David. Some call me the Goliath killer or the King of Israel. I call myself a broken man, but one who's been given far more than I deserve. Early on, I thought I was just lucky. After a few years working as a shepherd, I landed a job playing harp in King Saul's palace. This led to my fateful win over Goliath and a promotion to general. With each military victory, my fame increased. Saul grew jealous and tried to kill me with a spear, but I escaped to the countryside. The mad ruler pursued me relentlessly with assassins and armies. Somehow, I survived. God was looking out for me. When Saul died, I took the throne, and God supported me with a team of super warriors to fight for peace. These mighty men were skilled, valiant, and remarkably loyal. They demonstrated their character many times. One such day, the Philistines had us cornered in a valley. Outmanned, we took cover in a cave to revise our strategy. Exhausted, I slumped against a wall and sighed, I'd love a drink of water from the well of Bethlehem. It was just a little nostalgia for home, a pointless craving. Without me knowing, 3 of my mighty men overheard this and left our garrison. The trio fought through the Philistine army for many miles, finally arriving at the water hole. The soldiers returned and presented the water to me. It took a moment to comprehend what they'd done. These servants, hearing an offhand comment from their king, had risked life and limb to give me a simple refreshment. The level of dedication, the depth of love, the costly sacrifice they exhibited moved me to tears. I stuttered, "Who am I to deserve such devotion?" Overcome with gratitude, I gathered the men and poured out the liquid as an offering to God. I prayed, "Far be it from me, Lord, that I should drink this water. Its value is equal to the blood of the men who risked their very lives to get it." I don't think I fully understood God's love for me until that day. During my reign, we beat the Philistines and achieved peace. Outwardly, I had all the trappings of success, but like so many with power, I abused it. Lust and paranoia led me to do unthinkable things. Broken with shame, I wept before God, confessing my mistakes with no expectation that He would ever hear my prayers. Yet, with astonishing grace, He poured it over me, time and time again, like that refreshing flask of water from the well at Bethlehem.
Well, if you have high hopes, I think you are in the right place this morning. I think there's actually something in all of us that wants to be like that wants to do something great, to build a legacy, to be amazing, to do something that's worth remembering, something that we would look back on our lives and say, I know I was successful. I think that's what being Lionhearted is about. That no matter what stands in my way, this thing matters. It matters to me. It matters to my family. It matters to my company. It matters to people I care about. And I'm going to do this thing no matter what stands in my way because I want to be great. To use the language of the men that we've been studying in this series, we've been calling them David's mighty men. David is one of the most famous kings in all of history. But how often do you look at people around you and say, now there's a mighty man? Do you do that? Is that what you're thinking right now as you look at me? I don't use that phrase very much, but what it's describing is that these were his warriors, but not all of their might came from their feats of strength. It came from their character, and it came from their God. And so these mighty men become examples for us. You see, when you read the Bible, I don't know what you think about the Bible. I don't know what you think at this point about God or about Jesus. But I believe that the Bible is actually a book that God wrote so that we would know Him better and know how He wants to help us live our lives. What that means is that when I open this book and I look at something like we're going to do today, everything that we're going to talk about today is about one paragraph. It's from here to here. And when I read that, then I say, okay, now I know what happened, I guess. Am I supposed to do something with this or what? Well, I always ask myself, of all of the pages that God could have written, why this page? Why this paragraph? Is there an example for me to follow here? Or maybe there's an example for me not to follow. And so as we look at this event, what you just heard described in that audio, I think we're going to see three mighty acts. You see, you've got David's mighty men going out through enemy lines to get him a drink of water, bring it back. And if the story stops right there, wow, those guys are incredible. How mighty. But the story doesn't stop there because when they get back, David dumps it out. Which is like, leave that part out, right? I mean, if I'm those guys, I'm thinking, do you have any idea how much I just went through to get you this water? And yet it's included there. And so I'm going to propose to you today that what David does is actually one of the mighty acts in this passage, in this paragraph. That there are actually three of them, but to understand why David does that, we've got to understand the other two first. So let's look at this event. This actually comes from a historical book, a book of history called 2 Samuel. And we're in chapter 23, and it's verse 13. It says, then 3 of the 30 chief men. So David had 30 mighty men, and these are 3 of the chief. These are the mightiest of the mighty. 3 of the 30 chief men went down at harvest time and came to David at the cave of Adullam, and the troop of Philistines encamped in the valley of Rephaim. Now, I don't know if geography is a strong point for you. It is not for me, and I understand that these are weird geographical terms that we're probably not familiar with, but hang in there, we'll get there. Because look what it says next. David was then in the stronghold, so he's in that cave, and the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. I bet you know that one. And David said with longing, "Oh, that someone would give me a drink of the water from the well of Bethlehem," which is by the gate. Kind of an offhand comment that his men pick up on and go on this mighty quest to bring it back to him. Now, the reason you probably know Bethlehem is because historically Bethlehem is where Jesus was born. And so this tiny little town becomes one of the most famous towns in all of history because it's the birthplace of Jesus. But in this moment in history, what's recorded in 2 Samuel, Jesus has not been born yet, and Bethlehem has become famous because it was the birthplace of King David, the man whose mighty men we have been studying, the man who you just heard speak and retell that story. And so it becomes a place of prophecy because the place that David, the king, was born is the place that Jesus, the king, was born. And so Bethlehem is significant because it's David's home. So when he's in this moment right now where the Philistines are between him and Bethlehem, they have a garrison, an army set up inside Bethlehem, and David is in this moment of longing. And it's this mixture of something really good that would satisfy his soul, this drink of water, combined with the nostalgia of the fact that he's so close to his hometown in a simpler time when he was growing up in that town with that well, drinking that water. So this is kind of like a Citizen Kane moment for David. If you've seen that movie, at the beginning of the movie, Citizen Kane is laying in bed at the end of his life and he says, "Rosebud." And the rest of the movie, you're like, what's Rosebud? We got to get him Rosebud. How do we figure out what's Rosebud? And then at the end of the movie, you discover that Rosebud was the name of the sled that he used to ride on when he was a little boy back home. A reminder of a simpler time when there weren't so many pressures and anxieties and stressors to worry about, but life was simple, and it was clean, it was good. Did I just spoil that for you? You've seen Citizen Kane, right? It came out like 100 years ago, so I think you're on your own on that one. You know what Soylent Green is too, right? I won't spoil that one for you, but just don't eat it. Okay. If you watch that movie, you're going to be like... But this is David's Citizen Kane moment. This is David longing for something good, something simple, something clean, something from home. But right now he's trapped in the cave of Adullam. It's about 13 miles away from Bethlehem. This is one of the things that's great about Bible history because while you and I say geography and where Rephaim, where is that? I can show you a picture of this cave because it is still there today. So when the Bible writes history, one of the reasons that we can rely on it is because it's not vague about when or how or where these things happened. It's in specific locations and we can still go and find them. And so this is the cave that David would have been sitting in, longing for something so good. And so I wonder for you, what is that thing that you long for? When you hear a song like High Hopes, if it gets your blood moving a little bit, what's the thing that you're ready to charge out the back door because you know what? I've been thinking about it for too long. Today I'm going to do that thing. What is it? Maybe it's like David. You're thinking back to your childhood. What did you dream that you would be when you grew up? How did you want to change the world? Were you always practicing in the backyard that you might be the one who takes the game-winning shot as the buzzer sounds? Maybe it's in a season of life right now that you think, I want to be mighty. I want to be a great dad. I want to be a great mom. I want to be a great spouse. I want to be a great brother or sister or son or daughter or grandparent. I want to be a great boss or coworker. I want to look back on this season of my life and know that I was successful. But sometimes you feel like you're sitting in the back of a cave, right? And you can see that there's light up ahead. I mean, you can still hold on to that thing. You can kind of remember it as I'm talking about it, but you're not really sure, how do you get to Bethlehem from here? It seems like there's a lot of obstacles in the way. Well, I want you to get that thing in mind. What is something that drives you to be great, to be mighty? You got it? Now let me ask you another question. Have you ever had someone help you reach that goal? If you have, think about the gratitude, the love you have toward that person who helped you. As I was studying for this, I discovered this story, our creative team actually found it, about a man named Harvey Lewis. Now, Harvey is actually from the Cincinnati area, and Harvey is a runner. So if you are a runner, good for you. I'm a basketball player, so to me, running was always punishment. Like if coach is mad, we're going to run. But there are people who just love to run. Well, Harvey takes that to like another level. So the flying pig was fun for him, but he wanted to run the Appalachian Trail. Like over 2,000 plus miles through mountains and over rocks and down valleys and through the forest to try to set a world record. Okay, so there's like, some of us run, and then like there's Harvey Lewis. But what I love about this guy is that he wanted to do something great, and he set his mind to it. He set the goal, he started training, he started doing all of these things, but he wasn't alone. In fact, he actually had a team with him who was helping with things like nutrition, a team who would be there at the end of the day to offer encouragement or in case there was an emergency. And one of the people on his team was his father. So I want to show you a clip that just gives you a snippet of the running that Harvey would actually do. But it also shows his dad. So I want you to see that, and then I'll tell you a little more about it. Let's watch.
Morning, guys. Oh, wow. Hey, I'll see you at 20 miles. It's in 12 miles from now.
Why not just stop and talk to the people, huh?
Just not too much.
I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for both of us, and it's a story that is going to resonate.
Now here's why that's going to be a story that will resonate. What's really interesting is that they track records on the Appalachian Trail in two different categories. One of them they call an unassisted run. That's basically a runner and their backpack, and you do the best you can. The other is called an assisted run, and that's what Harvey did, when you bring a team with you who can assist you along the way. Now the reality is that both runners, whether you're doing assisted or unassisted, they stop at night to rest. It's crazy, they run something like 50 miles each day, rest at night, eat, try to recharge and be ready for the next day. But an assisted run has a team of people who they would meet up with each night who are helping them get the right nutrition, get the right rest, and just give them encouragement. What's incredible is that the record for an assisted run is something like 4 days faster than an unassisted run. Even though both of them stop at night to rest and all of these things. And what I love about that is the reality that leaders, guys, we go farther, faster when other people are willing to sacrifice to help you reach a goal. That's what Harvey's dad was there for. That's why it resonates. That's why they'll never forget it, because he was a part of that with Harvey. In fact, in an interview, Harvey was asked, a lot of supported attempters have a loved one head their crew as opposed to someone with a running background. Why do you think that is, and how valuable was it to have your father there day in and day out? And this is what Harvey said. With my father, I just lucked out in the biggest way. He knew I wouldn't give up, and I knew he wouldn't give up on me. He knew what I needed with nutrition, knew my physical abilities, and knew what to say to spark my heart to stay in the game. I felt comfortable with my father. He was reliable. If there was an emergency, I don't doubt my father would be the first one there, no matter the location or the difficulty of the trail. You see, Harvey's father was willing to sacrifice so that Harvey could reach his goal. That's mighty act number one. Sacrifice for the longing of a leader. You see, David is one of the most famous kings in all of history. And he was a scoundrel. I mean, we've seen in some of these weeks that there are times where his life is so on track that he's actually writing things down from God himself that end up in this book so that you and I can make sense of our own lives. There's other times where his life is so off track that God has to send other people to him to say, David, aren't you listening? And it's his recognition of guilt and his requests for forgiveness in those moments that make it into this book. But even David was not David without these mighty men. Because these men also looked to God for strength, for power, for energy, and served David faithfully. He went farther than he ever could have gone without them. And so I want you to think about that for yourself. Maybe it's sacrificing for a leader. Maybe you take that word leader out. Just how can you sacrifice for the longing of another person? For your spouse, for your kids, for someone you work with. What if the mightiest thing you can do is actually to help someone else be mighty? And I don't know about you, but when I start to think about things like that, I start to ask myself questions like, okay, what is it going to cost me? I mean, because I got a lot of stuff I got to work on too. I try to stop short of saying like, what's in it for me? But I'm thinking that way. And so I thought it was helpful to paraphrase Martin Luther King Jr., which seems fitting this weekend. He said this, that instead of asking, if I help them, what will happen to me? And instead start asking, if I don't help them, what will happen to them? See, I think that's the way that David's men were thinking. He's our friend, he's our king. If we don't help him, what will happen to him? And so they decide to do something mighty. They decide that this is worth the sacrifice. And you and I, we want to be like that. But sometimes there's something standing in our way. And for these guys, what was standing in their way was the Philistine army. Right? And the Philistines are not pushovers. Like, these are Goliath's people. They have giants on their side. And yet these guys were going to break through. Look at what it says in the next verse, in verse 16. So the three mighty men broke through the camp of the Philistines, drew water from the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. They heard the longing and they took action. And when you find yourself in that place, when you find yourself charged up, you're excited, you're thinking, I want to do it, I want to go for it, nothing's going to stop me. The reality is, then you realize there are barriers. There are enemy lines in the way. There are things that are going to try to stop you, even if you don't want to stop. See, that's what these men discovered, but look at what it says. They broke through. See, mighty act number 2 is to break through the line. Break through the line. Because there will be enemy lines. And those enemy lines do not go away just because you close your eyes and pretend they're not there. Those enemy lines do not go away because you say, this is harder than I thought, I will try again tomorrow. They'll still be there. In fact, sometimes those enemy lines are just blind spots that we have about ourselves. So think about whatever that thing is for you. Some area of your life, something that you want to be great. What holds you back? What barriers are in the way? See, I think sometimes it's our own fear. I want to be great, but I'm not sure I want to put myself out there like that. That risk may be too big. There may be too much embarrassment if this doesn't go the way I'm hoping. Sometimes it's not fear, it's our own complacency. Yes, I want to be great. Okay, here's how much work it's going to be. Oh, I want to be good enough. I want to be average. I just don't want to be like at the bottom of the list, right? I mean, if you've ever played sports, you know this is how it goes. Like, you guys want to win the championship? Yeah, coach, we want to win the championship. Okay, today we're going to run. Oh, coach, let's just make regionals, coach. We don't have to work that hard, do we, coach? Oh, you want us to get in the weight room too, coach? You see, here's the thing. It takes hard work to break through. I think about, just for myself, some of the things that I think about is like, I want to be a great husband and I want to be a great dad. Like, I want to get through this season of my life and look back and know that I was successful. And not just say, like, hey, we survived it, right? But like, yeah, that was special. I stepped up to something. I feel good. You know, I joke because, like, when my wife and I first got married, I'm like, yeah, I want to be a great husband. I want to be the best husband someday. I want my kids to tell stories about me. What a dad. He was always wonderful, right? So it's already too late for that. But but one of the things that my wife would say is she would look at me and say, okay, well, here's some places in our marriage that I think, you know, we probably need some work. We could be stronger. And, like, internally, I agree. Okay, but, you know, so what are you thinking? Well, maybe we could get some counseling. I mean, I think I'll be a good husband. Because I didn't know, like, I was going to have to go to counseling and stuff. That's awkward. It's embarrassing. That means I have to admit weakness. Okay, well, maybe, you know, there's this marriage retreat we could do. You could do? You take notes? I'll read what you write down. Right? And I resisted that stuff for a long time. It's like, yes, I will recommend those things to other people. They do sound helpful. Because there was some complacency in me, some fear in me that I wanted to be great, but first I had to admit that I actually needed some help to do that, right? That I could actually get input from other people that could make me a better husband, a better father. And we have done counseling and marriage retreats since then, and they actually are awesome and helpful, and our marriage is so much stronger than if I had said, I don't think I really want to have to do that. So I don't know what it is for you. I don't know what it is that might hold you back, but I'll encourage you, break through the line. In fact, one of the men's studies that we do here is called Authentic Manhood. And Authentic Manhood actually starts next Sunday night or next Monday morning. And that's a big part of why we do that, because sometimes I'm trying as hard as I can, but I'm not even sure I know what I'm trying. Like, I want to be a great dad, and that looks like something, and so I got to do some stuff to get there. And so this is actually built for some guys to get around each other, build some friendships. Here's some great teaching on what it looks like and how to get there. And that actually one of those factors, if you can receive this, is that God wants to help you. See, a lot of times we think that coming to God for help means that I have to admit weakness. But I say, think about it more like a warrior. Think about it like these mighty men. Think about it like an athlete. If I come to coach and he says, hey, we're going to hit the weight room, it's not really so much as a question of, are you too weak? It's a question of, can you be stronger? You want to be stronger as a dad, stronger as a mom, stronger as a husband, stronger as a wife. You know, we have women's studies that are out there as well. One of them is talking about how to get rid of baggage and things that I've carried in my life that weigh me down, because just by dropping that weight, I now have more strength to move forward. And that God wants to help with that. You see, that's what David figured out. David's greatest triumphs were when he was completely leaning on God. David's greatest failures are when he leaned on himself. Because we have limits, but God doesn't. And that's what's so unique about this God. That's what's so unique about this book. See, when God writes this to you to tell you about himself, he doesn't say, your job is to be great. If you're great enough, I'll let you in. Instead, he says, my standard is so high, I know you'll never reach it. I'll meet the standard for you, and then I'll help you live in my love. I'll help you learn how to obey. When I call you to do something, I'll give you the resources to do it. I will make you mighty. You see, David had learned that, and he actually wrote in one of his journals in a place called Psalm 18 these words. He said, for by you I can run against a troop. By my God, I can leap over a wall. See, now we're talking about like Superman kind of stuff, right? Leap tall walls in a single bound. The idea is David's saying, you think you're going to stop me from what God's called me to do? You think you're going to stop me from my high hopes, from this mighty thing, from this great work? You and what army? The Philistine army? Don't care. I can run against a troop if God is on my side. You plus an army are outnumbered if it's me and God. If it's just me, if I'm chasing my own plans, those things can fail. But if I'm tracking with God's plans, God never fails. So I love this verse because David is a man who knew this on like a spiritual level, metaphorically, but also literally. We've seen stories of these guys in the last weeks where it is one man and God against an army. God wins. That's might. A few weeks ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, a guy that I would have described as a mighty man. I mean, he had everything going for him in life, and I actually met him as a part of Authentic Manhood here, and not everybody shares at the level that I'm about to share his story with you, and that's okay. But what he told me was he hit this place in his life where he had built a company, and it was strong, and it was growing quickly, and they were hiring, and they were like doubling revenue year over year. Everything was great. As he would tell it now, there were probably some signs that that bubble was about to burst that he was not totally willing to pay attention to. And so what ended up happening was that bubble did burst, and like everything in life fell apart. The company fell apart. They had to lay off like all of their staff. He started having to, just as he sat in that cave and feeling that darkness and feeling depression and frustration, and now stuff from his past is coming up that's like, I wanted to forget about that. I didn't want to deal with that. And as he wrestled through all of this, he turned to God. He started saying, okay, I've hit the limit on my own. As mighty as he was, this was as far as he could take himself. And it all crashed. And so he described in this time how God came to him, how he felt like for the first time, even though he'd grown up kind of around religion, and it was the first time he felt like he had a relationship with God, like God was his father that was on that trail with him. And so he went into that time and said, God, what do you want to teach me? And he felt like God showed him the barrier, the enemy line that he was stuck against was pride. Because he believed he was already mighty. Look at my company, and look what I've built, and look what I've done, and things are going well. And that's what had always happened. He was raised that way. He was brought up for that, and he was always mighty. And what he discovered was that God needed to break that down so that he could make him even mightier. He ended up putting his faith in Jesus. He now calls himself a Jesus follower. He was actually baptized right here at Horizon, which is basically a public demonstration of the fact that he follows Jesus. And God has been healing his pride in a way that now he loves the new job that he has. He's digging into Bible studies with guys around here. He's actually building his company back up. It's not where it was, but he's working on it. And he knows that this time he's mightier than ever before because God has taught him humility. You see, he discovered what David's mighty men discovered. They crashed through enemy lines. They got the water. They brought it back to David. They saved Private Ryan. Someone tell the academy. We're all going to clap and we're all going to get awards and it's going to be wonderful and it's going to be great. And that is the end of the story. Thank you for coming. Except you already know it's not the end of the story, right? If that's where we stop, that sounds mighty. That sounds exciting. That's all we need, isn't it? But the story keeps going, and this is what it says. Nevertheless, this is David now, he would not drink it, but poured it out to the Lord. And he said, far be it from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Is this not the blood of the men who went in jeopardy of their lives? Therefore he would not drink it. These things were done by the three mighty men. Now again, if God does not waste pages, doesn't waste paragraphs, doesn't waste words, why include this piece in the story? Because like if I'm these guys, I'm like, hey, I appreciate that you are coming to terms with what this cost us, and maybe you'll be more careful about the things you say out loud in the future, but please drink that. That was really hard to get. Or at least like water the fern or something, like don't just dump it out. But this is what David's doing. You see, in their culture, there was something called a drink offering. So for all of the things that God had given his people as ways to worship him, when they come together to sing to God, to tell him how great he is, all of the offerings and sacrifices that they did, one of them was called a drink offering. And it was usually wine because wine looked like blood, and blood represents life. And so they would take wine, and instead of drinking it, they would pour it out to the Lord, representative of their life. So in doing that act, a person would be saying, God, thank you for my life. I pour out my life to you. I give my life, I commit my life to you. That's the symbolism that came to be for the drink offering. And so that is what David is doing right here, but David's pouring out water. I said it was usually wine. But look at how he characterizes this water. Look at what he says. Is this not the blood of the men who went in jeopardy of their lives? You see, for David now, this water symbolized the blood of their lives. And so David takes a moment that would have been good, mighty, powerful, cool, but the last thing would be David quenching his thirst, and so in that moment, then it was all for him. You see, by pouring it out to the Lord, David turns this into a moment where he honors the people that he leads. He lifts their names and their lives up and says, God, thank you for the lives of these men. I honor these men before you. Do you see the switch? The people who served the king were willing to sacrifice anything for him. But now it's the king who makes a sacrifice for them. Mighty act number 3 is to pour out your best for the ones you lead. You see, that is what David did here. In this moment, this is the best thing he has. This is the rosebud. This is the Bethlehem well water. This is the nostalgia and the thirst quenching and everything all wrapped into one. It's the one thing he's longed for, and he pours it out so that they might be honored before God himself. I remember a number of years ago, as I was just getting started in my career, there was a man named Dick Luazzo who was the VP for our region of our global organization. And every single week, he was spending part of his time investing in me when I was just like an associate at one location of our organization. And as I thought back on that, I thought, like, I love this guy. I mean, what an incredible thing, an incredible gift that he gave me to give me his time, to give me his energy, to give me his wisdom, that he was using his own time. He was even taking flack from his boss, from the president, saying, why are you spending this much time on somebody who's like that far down the totem pole? But he fought for me. He said, because this is a guy who's willing to learn. This is a guy who's willing to listen. This is a guy who wants to grow, and I think it's important for him. In fact, even after I left that organization, Dick continued to pour into my family, and he's one of the people that helped us when my aunt died of cancer. I thought that was a guy who knew how to pour out his best for the ones he leads. What does that look like for you? Who do you lead? Who do you influence? Where do you have impact? Is it a spouse? Is it with kids? Is it people that work for you or people you work with? You know, another man who understands this example, we actually have a holiday for him this weekend. Martin Luther King Jr. was a leader who knew what it took to sacrifice for those he led. And I love his story. I love his example. And he's just one of the most dynamic speakers that has ever lived, I think. But what was so amazing is that as a leader willing to sacrifice, he actually described that the way he did that was because of the God that he followed. So on April 3rd, 1968, he was in Memphis, Tennessee, giving a talk, and he said this, I just want to do God's will. Everything he was doing, everything that he talked about as he tried to bring racial unity to our country, everything that he talked about when he looked at people who had been hurt, who'd been betrayed, who'd been arrested illegally, all of these things, and he would tell them, you know what I want you to do? I want you to forgive because that's what Jesus does. I want you to love because that's what Jesus does. All of it, he says, I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. The next day, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed. And when I hear those kinds of stories, those kinds of sacrifices, I always think to myself, like, I wonder if he knew that was coming. I wonder if he thought it was worth it. Well, this speech from the night before tells you he knew that death was a very real possibility for what he was doing. But he was willing to sacrifice even his life for the leader he followed in God and for the people who followed him. Now, for most of us, it probably doesn't come down to sacrificing your actual life in that way. And yet sometimes it can be almost as difficult to sacrifice our time, to sacrifice our talents, to sacrifice treasure or other investments that we make in people because there's so much going on, and I've got so many other things to do, and like, I want to be good at this, but I want to be good at that, but I want to be good at this, and I want to be good at that, and then I go through another week, and I'm like, I did nothing on any of them. What does it take to pour out our best for those that we lead? Well, you want to see how deep the Bethlehem well goes? Have you ever heard of the Last Supper? What we celebrate now in churches everywhere as communion or the Lord's table or the Lord's Supper, it's a time that we remember the death of Jesus for us. But do you know what Jesus said when he sat at that Last Supper with his closest friends? Look at this. In the same way, he took the cup after they had eaten, saying, "This cup, which is poured out for you, is the new covenant in my blood." The very same words of the drink offering. Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, saw his death as a drink offering for you. That he poured out his very life. He poured out his very blood on that cross. He was the one who broke through enemy lines to bring you what you needed the most, what you longed for the most, even when you don't realize it. Forgiveness for every time you've been a scoundrel, just like David. Or maybe you do it in different ways than David. And a relationship with God, your Father. That Jesus, the King of Kings, was not only the one who broke through enemy lines, but he was the one who was willing to sacrifice for the ones that he loves. And I don't know how that hits you. I don't know what it feels like to hear me say that God loved you so much that he came as Jesus the man and died because he loves you. But that was the sacrifice, that was the offering that he was willing to pour out because he loved you so much. And that matters because that is unique in Christianity. So many other religions, what they tell you is be good enough and then God will decide if you are worth it. But Jesus says you are worth it, and that's why he sacrificed himself. That everything else we do, when we decide to follow him, to obey him, to love him, is because of the love that he has shown us first. So here's your key takeaway. Pour out your best for Jesus because he poured out his life for you. So wherever it is that you long for, whatever it is where you sacrifice for others, wherever it is that you break through enemy lines, all of this, pour out your best for Jesus because he poured out his love, his life for you. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you that you are our highest hope. Thank you that you love us, and thank you that you poured out your life as a drink offering for us. Jesus, thank you that you are the King who sacrifices for us. I pray that you would help us learn how to pour that out for others the way you have showered your love on us. Amen.
You can play the game and you can act out the part. No, it wasn't written for you. How can you stand there with your broken heart, ashamed of playing the fool? One thing can lead to another. It doesn't take any sacrifice. Father and mother sister or brother. If it feels nice, don't think twice. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Things are gonna work out fine if you only will. As I like to say to you, shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Things are gonna be much better if you only will. You can run, but you cannot hide. This is widely known. What you plan to do with your foolish pride when you're all by yourself alone? Won't you tell somebody the way that you feel? You can feel it beginning to ease. I think it's true what they say about a squeaky wheel. Always getting the grease is better. Just shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Things are gonna work out fine if you only will. Do as I say. Oh, shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Things are gonna be much better if you only will. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel. Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel.
Make it
Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel.
Make it
Shower the people you love with love. Show them the way that you feel.
Now everybody,
Show them
go
the way
out,
that you
somebody.
feel.
Somebody got to show
Shower the
someone.
people you
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Show them the way that you feel. Things are gonna be much better if you only will. Thank you, Albert. A little fun trivia on that song. I sang that song at the very first Public Horizon service in April of 2001 at our first service back at Cincinnati Country Day School. That's a little bit ago. I had looked just like this, except I had a long ponytail, and my youthful exuberance hadn't yet been beat out of me. But other than that, everything's just the same. So we're glad you're here today, and we hope to see you next week as we continue in the Lionhearted series. Have a great afternoon. Thanks.